Amira was just about to collect her gallon of palm oil from her regular seller, Tammy, when a woman's scream pierced through the crowd, sharp, desperate, and trembling. "No! Don't collect it! That's not palm oil. That's blood!" The entire market froze. Amira's hand shook and her heart pounded. She turned slowly toward Tammy, the always smiling, always polite seller trusted by everyone, who now stood pale, frozen, and speechless. Amira's voice trembled. "Blood? What's she talking about?" But Tammy couldn't say a word. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled violently. In that moment, Amira's world tilted, and everyone suddenly realized that what they had been buying all this while was never just palm oil at all. Long before that day of chaos, Tammy was the kind of woman everyone trusted. She was neat, soft-spoken, respectful, and always full of joy. She greeted every customer with a smile, calling them my sister or my good customer. Her market stall was always clean, her palm oil bottles lined up neatly on a wooden rack, shining like red gold under the morning sun. The smell of fresh oil always lingered around her corner, mixing with the chatter of market women. Her business was booming, and her oil stood out among others. Women came from different areas, even from neighboring towns, to buy from her. Some didn't even bother to price. They just handed her the money and said, "Tammy, please measure my usual. I don't want to buy from any other person." And Tammy, smiling warmly, would fill their bottles carefully and say, "God bless your kitchen, my sister. Your pot will be sweet today." She had become a household name. People referred to her as Aya Palm Oil, a title of respect in the market. Her oil had a bright, glowing red color that seemed to never fade. Even after months on the shelf, it still looked as fresh as the day it was produced. Other sellers envied her, but none could compete. Those who sold near her whispered among themselves, "Her oil fries faster. It looks like real village oil. Maybe she gets it straight from the forest palm. See how red it is, just like original blood color." They laughed at their own joke, never realizing how close to the truth they were. Many wondered how her oil stayed so bright and thick for so long, but no one ever asked her. Why would they? Tammy was polite, godly, and hard-working. She was even known to lead prayers at the market every first Monday of the month. She often said, "It's God who gives blessings. When your hands are clean, your business will prosper," and everyone believed her. She was respected, loved, and trusted. The last person anyone would ever suspect of evil. But beneath all that warmth was a dangerous secret, one no one ever saw or imagined. And it escalated one faithful day. That morning started like any other. The sun had risen bright and golden over the marketplace, lighting up the air with warmth and the smell of fried plantains, fish, and the earthy aroma of palm oil. Tammy was in her usual cheerful mood. She had received several orders the day before and was busy preparing her deliveries. Her red gallons, carefully cleaned and sealed, stood in neat rows waiting to be loaded. Her driver, Dele, an energetic young man, helped her carry them to the back of the van. Tammy hummed a gospel tune softly under her breath as she counted them. "Dele," she said with a smile, "today we have to deliver everything early. I don't want any customer to complain." Dele nodded. "No problem, Madam Tammy. You always plan well by 10 a.m. They were already making their rounds, first to the nearby shops, then to the homes of regular customers. Each delivery was smooth until they got to Amira's compound. Amira was one of her most loyal buyers, a cheerful young woman who ran a small catering business from home. She trusted Tammy's oil so much that she used it for all her cooking contracts. When she saw Tammy's van pull up, Amira came out smiling from her doorstep, tying her wrapper tightly as she approached. "Ah, my seller. You brought it early today." Tammy grinned, setting the gallon down. "You know me, my dear. I like my customers to cook fresh. That's why my business grows." Amira laughed. "You and your special red oil Whenever I use any other one to cook, the food will just be tasteless." They both chuckled. Tammy bent to lift the gallon closer to her, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. But before Amira could stretch her hand to collect it, a voice screamed from behind. "Don't collect that thing. That's not palm oil, it's blood." The scream tore through the air like a slap. Everyone around turned. Amira froze mid-reach, her smile faded instantly. The plastic gallon nearly slipped from Tammy's grip. Standing a few feet away was an elderly woman, Mama Folklore, one of the oldest traders in the market. She was breathing heavily, her wrapper loosely tied, sweat shining on her forehead. Amira frowned, confused. "Mama Folklore, what are you saying?" The old woman pointed directly at Tammy. Her voice trembled but carried the kind of authority that silenced the air. "I saw her this morning behind her shop. I saw her prick her hand and let blood drip into that gallon. I swear on my children I saw it with my own eyes." The compound fell deadly silent. Even the birds seemed to pause mid-flight. Amira blinked, her voice barely a whisper. "Blood?" she whispered, confused. The other neighbors who had gathered to watch looked at one another in horror. Tammy's face drained of color instantly. Her lips trembled. "It's not what you think," she stammered. I didn't." But no one waited to hear the rest. Mama Folklore shouted again, "Open it! Let's smell it. You people should open it." A young man standing by the gate stepped forward. Without hesitation, he twisted the cap open. As the lid came off, a strange metallic scent filled the air, sharp, thick, and unnatural. It wasn't the usual warm smell of palm oil. The crowd gasped almost in unison. A murmur rippled through them. "This isn't palm oil. What have we been eating?" "Jesus, I've been buying from her for months." Amira staggered back, covering her mouth. Her stomach turned. She felt sick. "Tammy, tell me it's a lie," she said weakly. "Please tell me it's not true." Tammy burst into tears. She dropped to her knees right there, hands clasped tightly. "Please," she cried. "I didn't mean to harm anyone." "I swear I didn't." But her tears did not soften them. The women were already furious. "You made us feed our children with this? You are wicked." The voices rose, angry and sharp. Tammy tried to explain, but the noise drowned her. Dele, her driver, stood frozen by the van, unable to defend his boss. He looked terrified, like a man who had just realized he might be an accomplice to something he didn't understand. The tension grew unbearable. Mama Folklore moved closer, pointing a trembling finger at Tammy. "You will not go free today. You will explain this thing you've been selling to us." And with that, the crowd surged forward, grabbing Tammy by the arm. "Let's take her to the market," someone shouted. "Yes, she must confess where she got this evil idea from." Tammy cried and begged as they dragged her away. Her wrapper loosened, her head tie fell, but no one pitied her. Amira stood still, shaking her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. She couldn't believe that the woman she'd trusted, the same woman who prayed for her business, who smiled so warmly, had been selling her something dark all along. The red gallon lay open on the ground, the thick liquid gleaming under the sun. Too red, too strange, and now, too terrifying. As Tammy's cries faded into the distance, one thought echoed in Amira's mind. "So, we've been eating blood all this time?" The thought alone was horrible. Even saying it out loud felt unreal. By the time they got to the market square, word had already spread like wildfire. The entire place that usually buzzed with traders, laughter, and customers became something else entirely. Every stall was empty, every hand was pointing, and every voice was ready to demand answers. Men left their shops, women abandoned their sales, even children stood on benches just to see what was happening. At the center of the market stood Tammy, shaking, surrounded, and pale. Her once beautiful wrapper was dusty from being dragged on the ground. Her head tie had fallen off, and her face was streaked with tears. The angry crowd formed a circle around her like hunters around wounded prey. "Confess now," someone shouted. "You've been feeding us with blood," another screamed. "What kind of wickedness is this?" a woman cried, hitting her chest. Tammy fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, her hands shaking. "Please!" "It wasn't deliberate," she cried. "It was a preacher that told me to always do so." This time, the crowd froze. For a moment, even the market's noise died. Only the sound of the wind rustling through the abandoned umbrellas could be heard. Then someone whispered, "Did she just say, a preacher?" Another voice replied, "A preacher told you to do what? To put blood in oil?" And before anyone could speak again, the entire crowd erupted in confusion and disbelief. "She's lying! No preacher will say that kind of thing! This woman is mad!" But Tammy shook her head violently, crying harder. "I'm not lying! I swear I'm not lying! That was what he told me!" She pressed her hands together, looking helpless. "I didn't mean to harm anyone. I thought I was obeying what he preached to me." The people exchanged looks of confusion and anger. A few elderly women pushed closer. "Explain yourself, woman," one demanded. "Which preacher?" "What did he say exactly?" Tammy's chest rose and fell heavily as she tried to speak through sobs. And then she began her story. It all started months ago, back when her business was dying. Her small palm oil stall sat in a corner of the market, dusty, unnoticed, and quiet. While other sellers made money daily, hers barely sold a bottle. She would sit there from morning till night, her chin resting on her hand, watching as people passed by without even glancing at her table. She tried everything she knew, prayer, fasting, even free samples. But nothing changed. Customers would come, sniff the oil, frown slightly, and move to the next stall. By evening, she'd pack up what little she sold, heart heavy, eyes filled with tears. One particular day, after another hopeless afternoon, she broke down behind her stall. She sat on a small stool, head buried in her lap, crying. That was when he came. A frail-looking man with a walking stick, gray beards, and calm eyes. He was one of those old preachers who went around market squares quoting Bible verses and encouraging traders. He stopped near her stall, leaned slightly on his stick, and said gently, "My daughter, don't give up. Why are you crying?" She wiped her face with her wrapper and said, "Papa, my oil doesn't sell. People say it's not as red or sweet as others. I've prayed and fasted, but nothing works." The man nodded slowly, looking thoughtful. Then, in a calm, firm voice, he said something that Tammy would never forget. "Your blessing is in your blood. Whatever you mix with your blood will multiply, because life is in the blood." He smiled kindly, patted her shoulder, and walked away, leaving her speechless. Those words echoed in her mind all night. Your blessing is in your blood. Whatever you mix with your blood will multiply. That night she sat beside her oil bucket under the dim glow of her lantern. The air was quiet except for the chirping of crickets outside her window. She whispered softly to herself, "If my blessing is in my blood, then I will give my oil a little of my blessing." She took a small safety pin, pricked her finger, and let a few drops fall into the oil. The deep red liquid swallowed it easily. She stirred it with a spoon and prayed. She covered the bucket, wiped her tears, and went to bed believing something great had just begun. The next morning she took her oil to the market as usual, and for the first time in a long while, she sold everything, every drop. People praised the texture, the color, the taste. Some even came back later that day to ask for more. She smiled all through, whispering to herself, "It worked. My blessing truly multiplies in my blood." That night, she cried again, but this time, tears of joy. She had finally found her secret. From that day, she made it a habit. Every time she prepared a new batch of oil, she would repeat her small ritual. She would pour her fresh oil into a big bowl, light a candle, and then prick her finger to add a few drops of blood. To her, it wasn't evil. It was sacrifice. She believed she was giving part of her life to her work, that it would make her oil alive, blessed, and favored. And it seemed to work. Her sales skyrocketed. Customers called it miracle oil. Even restaurant owners queued up to buy in bulk. Her profit tripled, her name spread, and her confidence grew. She didn't question it, not once. But over time, her miracle oil began to change. She started adding more drops of her blood into it. The color became unnaturally bright, too red, almost glowing. The texture thickened slightly, and when used for cooking, it produced a strange metallic aftertaste. People thought it was just special. They said it gave food a richer color. No one suspected anything. And Tammy smiled proudly every time someone said, "I've never tasted palm oil like yours." To her, their satisfaction was confirmation that her blessing was working. But what she didn't know was that her so-called blessing was slowly becoming her curse. The mixture she made was no longer clean. The drops of blood she added would ferment after days of heat and exposure. That fermentation caused her oil to develop a strange smell that attracted attention. The very smell that later led to her exposure. And so, for years, she sold it confidently, believing God was prospering her, until that morning, when Mama Folklore saw her behind the shop. Back at the market square, the people were listening in stunned silence. Some covered their mouths in disbelief, others shook their heads slowly. A woman whispered, "She really believed it was from God." Another hissed, "So this woman used us to experiment with her foolishness." Tammy looked up weakly, her eyes swollen and red. "Yes, please believe me. The preacher told me, whatever you mix with your blood will multiply." I didn't think it was wrong. I swear, I only thought I was blessing my business. The murmurs turned into an uproar. "How can a preacher say that? She's lying!" "She's trying to shift blame. Let's take her to the preacher and hear from his mouth." The shouting grew louder until one elderly man raised his hand and shouted, "Everyone calm down. We'll all go and hear from this so-called preacher. If she's lying, we'll know. If she's telling the truth, then that preacher must explain what kind of gospel he's preaching." The crowd murmured in agreement. Tammy wiped her tears, trembling as two market women grabbed her arms and pulled her up. Her heart pounded heavily in her chest. She didn't even have the strength to argue anymore. Her entire world, her business, her name, her peace, had crumbled in one day. As the crowd began to march toward the edge of town, the sun beat down fiercely on their backs. The air smelled of dust and anger. Some followed out of curiosity. Some came out of fear. But for most, it was outrage. Outrage that something so dark had been hiding right before their eyes for so long. Tammy's tears dried on her cheeks as she whispered under her breath, "God, please, let them understand. I never meant evil." And with that prayer trembling on her lips, the crowd dragged her down the road, toward the preacher's house, toward truth, and toward the judgment that would decide her fate. The preacher's house sat quietly at the edge of town, shaded by tall palm trees and surrounded by a small wooden fence. He was an old man known to everyone, respected, gentle, and often seen at the market praying for traders and blessing their stalls. His name was Baba Isaiah. That afternoon, he sat outside on a stool, reading his worn-out Bible, when he heard the sound of shouting from a distance. At first, he thought it was the usual noise from the market, but the sound grew louder, angry voices, footsteps, and murmurs filling the air. He stood slowly, adjusting his old brown robe, squinting toward the road. Within minutes, the crowd appeared. Men, women, and young people flooding toward his compound, dust rising under their feet. At the center of the crowd was Tammy, her wrapper half-tied, her face swollen from crying. Baba Isaiah frowned in confusion. "What is happening here?" he asked. His voice was calm but firm. Amira pushed her way forward, her eyes red and her voice trembling with anger. "Papa, this woman says you told her to mix her blood into her palm oil so her business would multiply." The crowd erupted again, voices overlapping in outrage. "She said it was you. She said you're the one that told her life is in the blood. Explain yourself, old man." Baba Isaiah's eyes widened. His Bible nearly slipped from his hand. "What? God forbid!" he exclaimed. "That's not what I said." He turned toward Tammy immediately. "My daughter, when did I ever say such a thing to you?" Tammy fell to her knees again, crying so hard her words came out broken. "Papa, you said it months ago. You saw me crying because my palm oil wasn't selling. You told me, your blessing is in your blood. Whatever you mix with it will multiply." A shocked murmur swept through the crowd. Baba Isaiah covered his face with his palms and shook his head slowly. He sighed deeply, a long, sorrowful sound that made even the loudest voices go quiet. "Ah, my child," he said softly, lowering his hands. "You misunderstood me completely." He took a step closer to her, his old eyes glistening with pity. "When I said that, I wasn't talking about your blood from your body. I meant your effort, your sweat, your sacrifice. I meant that whatever you put your life, passion, and hard work into, God will multiply it." He paused, looking into her eyes. Blood in Scripture means life, not literal blood. I was telling you to put your life into your business, not your body's blood. The entire crowd gasped. Women covered their mouths in shock. A few men shook their heads in disbelief. One of the older women whispered almost to herself, "So, she truly misunderstood?" Another replied bitterly, "Misunderstanding or not, she's been feeding us with blood." "That's unforgivable." The murmurs grew again, some angry, some sorrowful, some confused. Baba Isaiah raised his hand gently. "My people, please. Let's not let anger blind us. This woman has sinned in ignorance. She thought she was doing something right. She never meant to harm anyone, but not everyone agreed." A young man stepped forward, frowning. "Papa, ignorance or not, she has made us eat blood. She's ruined her customers, her market, her name. Something must be done." Another voice joined. "If we let her go, others will do the same thing and say it was a misunderstanding too." The preacher sighed again, looking weary. He turned toward the sky and said quietly, "This is why knowledge is power. A word taken wrongly can destroy a life." Then he looked back at the crowd. "How many of you hear sermons and only take what your mind wants to hear? How many of you act without understanding? That's how destruction starts." The words silenced them for a moment. Even Amira, who had been boiling with anger, found herself staring quietly. Baba Isaiah turned to Tammy again. "My daughter, I forgive you. But what you did was wrong. Deeply wrong, even if you didn't know. Now others can learn from your mistake too." Tammy sobbed and nodded weakly. "Yes, Papa, I will accept anything. I only wanted my business to grow. I didn't mean any harm or evil." The preacher touched her shoulder lightly. "And that is why the Bible says, 'My people perish for lack of knowledge.'" Another elder in the crowd turned to the crowd again, his voice steady but heavy with pain. "Take her to the chief. Let the elders decide what should be done." The crowd murmured in agreement. A few nodded solemnly. Some whispered prayers under their breath, realizing how easily one could twist the truth without knowing it. As they began to walk her back toward the marketplace, the air was silent. Tammy didn't look back. She couldn't. Her mind echoed with the preacher's words. Blood means life, not literal blood. And as the crowd disappeared down the road, Baba Isaiah stood outside his house, staring after them, whispering to himself, one sentence, just one sentence misunderstood. And it turned blessing into curse, That day, the people didn't just witness a scandal. They witnessed how ignorance could destroy even the most sincere heart. As they arrived at the town square, the atmosphere became quiet, heavy with tension. The usually lively palace of the chief felt different, colder and graver. People gathered in small groups outside the courtyard, whispering among themselves. The chief sat on his carved wooden throne, a tall man in his late 60s, known for his wisdom and fairness. His eyes were sharp, his tone heavy with authority. In front of him knelt Tammy, her hands clasped tightly. Her wrapper was dusty, her eyes swollen from crying. To her right stood Baba Isaiah, the preacher. Around them were the market leaders, the elders, and the guards, all waiting for the chief to speak. The silence was suffocating. Finally, the chief raised his staff of office slightly and spoke. "Tammy," his voice echoed through the hall. "Do you know why you stand before me today?" Tammy bowed her head, tears spilling down her face. "Yes, my king," she said faintly, "because of the oil I sold, because I mixed it with blood." The chief's brows furrowed. "You have committed a great abomination," he said sternly. "You have fed the people of this town with something sacred, lifeblood. Even if you meant no harm, ignorance is no excuse." A low murmur spread through the room. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked at her with pity. Tammy fell flat on her face, crying uncontrollably. "Please forgive me, my king. I was only trying to survive. I didn't know it was wrong. I only followed what I thought was godly advice. I never meant to hurt anyone." The chief studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then his tone softened slightly. "I believe you did not intend evil. But your actions have brought fear, shame, and disgrace upon this market. A market that was once known for its honesty and purity." He stood slowly, his robe flowing to the ground. "You will not be imprisoned," he declared, "because you confessed openly and have shown remorse. But no wrongdoing should go without consequence." He struck his staff once on the ground. "Therefore, from today you are banned from selling palm oil for 5 years. Let this time teach you the meaning of wisdom and discernment." A gasp rippled through the people. Some women nodded solemnly. Justice, they thought, had been served. Others whispered with sympathy, shaking their heads in pity. "5 years is long," one of the market women whispered. "But at least she's alive," another replied quietly. "If this had happened in the old days, they'd have banished her completely." The chief turned his attention to Baba Isaiah. The preacher lowered his head respectfully. "And you," the chief said, "are also not free of blame." Your words, though meant in good faith, were spoken without clarity. A teacher of God must speak plainly, for even the wise can misunderstand, and the simple can destroy themselves with misinterpretation. The preacher bowed deeply. "Yes, my king," he said humbly. "I have learnt my lesson. From this day forward I will speak with greater care. My words will no longer leave room for confusion." The chief nodded slowly. "See that you do. The people trust your voice, and a trusted voice carries both blessing and danger." He sat back on his throne, his gaze shifting again to Tammy. "Woman," he said quietly, "I see now that you were not driven by greed or wickedness, but by desperation. Still, desperation can blind the heart. It's not every word from a preacher you act on without understanding. Even good advice can become a curse if you don't understand it. Let this punishment guide you back to wisdom." Tammy bowed deeply, her voice breaking. "Thank you, my king. I accept your judgment with humility. May God bless you for sparing my life." The guards stepped forward gently, helping her rise to her feet. Her body trembled, but there was a strange peace in her eyes, the kind that only comes after truth has broken through ignorance. As she turned to leave, the chief raised his voice one last time. "Let this be a warning to everyone here. Words are powerful. A careless message can turn blessings into curses. Let us all learn to seek understanding before we act." The elders nodded. The preacher murmured an amen, and Tammy, weak and ashamed, whispered a soft prayer as she walked out of the hall. Her punishment was heavy, but her heart felt lighter than it had been in years. Outside, the murmuring crowd watched her pass. Some spat in disgust, some sighed in pity. But everyone knew one thing. The story of the woman who mixed her blood with palm oil would be told for generations, not as evil, but as a lesson. Weeks turned into months, and then months into years. Tammy vanished from the market life that had once defined her. Her stall was taken over by another seller, younger, ambitious, and careful. People no longer spoke her name loudly, though every now and then her story resurfaced whenever traders argued about the power of words. Far from the noise of the town, Tammy started a small farm in a quiet village. She grew cassava, vegetables, and maize, simple, honest work. Her hands hardened, her face darkened from the sun, but her spirit began to heal. She no longer craved profit or praise. She only wanted peace. Every time she passed by a palm tree, her chest tightened with memory. The day her secret was exposed, the shame, the preacher's tears, the chief's voice echoing in her ears. She no longer touched palm oil. Even when she cooked, she used vegetable oil instead. She couldn't stand the sight of that red color anymore. It reminded her of everything she lost. But in her solitude, she found something she hadn't had in years: clarity. She began to understand that her greatest sin wasn't mixing blood with oil. It was failing to understand before acting. She realized how one misunderstood sentence had ruined her life, how her desperation made her twist wisdom into wickedness without even knowing it. So she changed. Whenever someone told her anything, a dream, a prophecy, a piece of advice, she didn't rush anymore. She prayed. She asked questions. She sought meaning before she acted. And slowly, peace returned to her heart. Lesson from this story. This story teaches us to be careful of what we buy and consume. It also reminds us that not every message is meant to be taken at face value. Some words are wisdom, others are warnings. And when you fail to seek understanding, even good advice can destroy you. Tammy wasn't evil, she was just ignorant. But ignorance, when mixed with desperation, can turn into something darker than evil itself. So before you act on any advice, even from a preacher, get it clear and understand before you obey. Did you enjoy the story? If you were in Tammy's shoes, would you call her evil, or just a victim of misunderstanding? And do you think the chief's judgment was fair enough? Tell me, have you ever heard something said one way, but later discovered it meant something completely different? Or bought something that looked good, but turned out to be wrong or harmful? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to African Tales by Emma Day for more intriguing stories filled with lessons, wisdom, and the truth about the world we live in. See you in the next one.